All right, and we are live, with Mr. Mark Stacey on joining, building, and scaling a fully remote team. Welcome, sir. It is all yours.
Thank you. Should be able to see the slides if someone could confirm in the Discord chat, but even without video or slides, we should be able to have a conversation about it. So jumping in, we are not short at all on materials for working remotely. COVID certainly escalated a lot of that, where there are multiple blogs and presentations and books written about working remotely and the impacts of COVID. There's also a lot of good material. If you guys can't see my screen, I'll just say it. Scaling Teams by Alexander Gross and David Loftusness. Great book, but there's a lot of material out there on building and really scaling a team as well. And so I'm not looking to replace any of that great material, more so add to it and really identify my own kind of lessons learned. I've been working remotely for about 10 years. My wife has been working remotely for 6 years, so it's really good that we get along as well as we do. And I recently joined Dragos. And when I joined, I was I think the 13th or 14th employee. That was 3 years ago, and we just hit over 200 people. So trying to bring the lessons learned that I've learned through that process here. So first couple notes on building, a couple initial kind of advisory topics. Generally, when we talk about a small team or building a capability, we're looking to start with proven experience. You're looking for specifically people that can identify future issues and then build a process around that to prevent future heroics. And that is incredibly important because you're doing the work while you're building the future processes that others will do. That requires not just motivation, but a certain level of professionalism. Specifically, what I look for is if people are able to remove themselves from the deliverable, focus on what the client needs, so that the future growth of the company is not based on what one person wanted, but based on what the clientele asked for. And so really the old kind of stereotype message of building the plane while it's in flight certainly rings true. You want to start with those kind of senior principal level folks and build it from there. Understanding that these people will also be really setting the culture for the company. So jumping down, kind of the first red block is start with diversity, and that translates to really establishing culture. It's very easy for a company to build a culture organically based on region or some of the first employees that come in. And so really starting with diversity and making sure that it is based on really the company tenets that we'll talk about as well, and not a region or group, is important. And things like holidays, vernacular, slang, sayings, all of those are really based on that. So next item, building tenants. We use another good book I'd recommend, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Very quick read. We use that book to build tenants for our team, and then we trickled those throughout the company. And where those really come in useful, using an example where I had one employee come and he was complaining about another employee.
I can't mute him,
I had
but
that same
I can hear
employee
you.
come and he was complaining about the original employee. And certainly whenever you have disagreements
Hey,
at work,
can you hear me?
could set up
Yeah, I can hear you. I just can't
like
mute
a meeting, and you could
the
help mediate
stream because of the way I
and
got it set up.
dive in and facilitate the conversation. But I think what that does is builds a culture around potentially unnecessary escalation. And so instead, that's where we could use the tenets at Dragos, their open, candid, transparent, and honest conversation. And so my advice to both employees was set up a meeting and start it by saying, I'm going to have an open, candid conversation. I'm removing myself. Let's focus on the output to the client and be transparent about what is working and what isn't. And then the culture is when you have a conflict, address it directly with the person and be open, be candid, but be professional. And so the tenets are incredibly important. Of course, manage media. And by that, we're not short on Slack, Skype, Zoom, any other type of electronic conferencing out there. But managing it is important. In the early days of Dragos, our team always turned on the video. If you have a 5-minute conversation, turn on the video. And we I think I saw someone else mention, we got to be known as the Brady Bunch because everyone would have their video array set up, but that propagated throughout the entire company. And it's especially important now when we hear, 70 to 90% of communication is nonverbal. Seeing facial expressions, whether or not you fold your arms or lean into the conversation, all of that matters. And it matters when you're scaling a team and growing a lot of people quickly. People don't understand sarcasm in written words on Slack. And so if you're going to have a quick conversation, it may be easy to do it in text, but set up a quick video call. Make it easy so that people understand a name with a face and they can kind of build that rapport and that baseline, because with COVID, they may not get it for another couple of years. One caution, because you're hiring people quickly, nobody gets excited about the term middle management, but it is important. And mostly I say organizing as a requirement because you've got all of these principal senior people that are running full speed. And the fastest path to frustration that I've seen is either duplication in work or people's output not being used. And so getting on a call and having someone say, I'm building this capability over here, and someone else on the team says, I already built that capability 4 months ago. That's what you want to avoid. And I think really that certainly a better term, but the organization or the middle management, really their job is to make sure that the priorities are understood and that we're not doing those two specific issues or pitfalls. On the joining side, a couple of quick notes to those joining teams that are growing quickly. Certainly identify the team's culture, but bring your own style. It goes back to the diversity concept. Bring in your knowledge, but bring in your own style, your own communication style, your likes and dislikes, and really contribute to the team. Life pro tip that seems straightforward, but I can't overstate it enough. When you are setting up a meeting or scheduling something, don't be naive to the impact of time zones and match those to the person you're scheduling it with. If I'm setting up a meeting with someone on the East Coast and I propose time, I'm not just going to say 10 a.m. I'm going to say 10 a.m. Eastern time or identify my target's area. That is, I think, a very simple thing that we could all improve on. And it really, again, kind of references back to that professionalism or experience working remotely. Also, the ability to be agile and have some adaptability, be able to understand ambiguity in the workplace is incredibly important. You may be hired to do one job, and the team is growing so quickly, you could add proficiency or contribute in another area, and you may be asked to do that as well. And that's okay. The adage of that's not what I was hired to do doesn't fit in very well with a lot of rapidly growing teams. And so go in with that and see it as an exciting thing. Under the kind of cautions, the red blocks, the two main cautions I would have is in the work-life balance, working remotely. Everybody wants it, but people don't really understand the impacts. Regardless if your kids, if you have them, are crying or laughing, you want to be out there. And the adage of always being available certainly exists. When I worked at DOE, I remember we were moving to one-day remote work, and it was to save money on heating and lighting for the building. And management said, quote, management said, well, it can't be Monday because people will just turn it into a 3-day weekend. And it can't be Friday because of the same reason. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I just candidly thought putting bounds around it like that is ridiculous. We're not treating employees like professionals. And in every study that has come out in the past 10 years that I've read, people end up working more when they work remotely because your work is always there. And in a remote team, it's very, very true where, especially international, you sit down to dinner, that may be the middle of the working day for Australia or Europe. And so when you join a team, anytime you open Slack or anything, you're going to see a question, some opportunity to contribute. Oh, great, I know the answer to that. You run down to your computer and then you're down there for 3 hours. And so the understanding that you have to leave work and where to put those separation points in, I think is certainly something to consider. Couple of quick notes on interviewing. I may come back to these if there's time, but essentially do some research, understand the culture of the company, understand that as you hire quickly, that culture will be stressed. They're not looking to put hard bounds around it, but maintain the culture while growing it, while adapting to what you bring in. So I'll jump over to scaling and then come back to the blue bars here if we have time. On the scaling front, I'll use what I do at Dragos now as an example because it's very fresh. And that is setting baselines, I think is critical to identify what success looks like. We have, say, 3 principal consultants, and all of them do a pen test based on their own experience. And all 3 of them, you could arguably say were very successful. Client was very, very pleased. Where that comes to be kind of a stress point is when we scale. And I hire maybe a more junior employee. If he does a pen test with all 3 of those principal analysts, he'll get 3 different viewpoints. Sure, maybe that's good from an experience standpoint, but how he formulates his own operating plan and his career growth for him to get to that principal level is now incredibly convoluted. And it's unclear how really Dragos or how the team should address pen tests. And so while individually they seem successful, having that baseline, having the tactical and really the kind of programmatic discipline in place for how that work is being done, I think is critical. And then very importantly, have some enablement plan. Have, if it's mentoring or a knowledge base, or you stand up a learning management system to enable those kind of, try not to use the word junior, but the consultant or entry-level staff. You will do a disservice to your team if you bring in a bunch of consultant level people without acknowledging the time that they will take from your principal level staff. That mentoring, that enablement is critical. The idea, I was talking about pen testing before, so going with that, the idea that you're going to teach them pen testing is not there, but you need to teach them the baseline. You need to teach them your company's approach to pen testing. So ensure you have that reorganized. Now is a good time. Again, we talk about mentoring to look at kind of the middle management, and a pivot to that is the career growth plan. And really the first kind of, the second square box down below there. At this point in your company, and maybe 1, 3, 5, 7 years in, you've got the original principals, the original already very senior level people that came in, they built the foundation, they wrote the baselines, they created the enablement. And so your career plan has to have a plan for them as well. You've got people very senior in their career scope. Where do we go from here? And so building out not just a career plan for the immediate team, but for what comes in the future and scale, I think is something to understand. And then the one caution, anticipate attrition. It will certainly always happen at if it's a funding round, Series ABC or an IPO or just rapid growth. attrition should be anticipated, and it should be celebrated in some regard. At Dragos, we've had people move on, and in those instances, it is bringing on maybe someone advanced in their career but looking for more opportunity. They get a lot of experience in new areas that maybe they wouldn't otherwise, the contracts or legal agreements or partnerships, and they really help build out a capability. They're there for a couple of years, and then they go on to be a director somewhere or a VP. And so celebrating the attrition and treating it like these individuals came in, they advanced the team very quickly, but they also advanced themselves and moved on. It doesn't have to be seen as a negative thing. So jumping over to my one quick note, and there were some great talks earlier today on interviewing and specifically skills to know for pen testing. One quick note I would say on that. One, I share a story when I left the government, went into private industry. I lived in Washington State, and the company was on the East Coast, and I realized very quickly that whenever you stop work with a remote team, from the time you stop work to the time you start work, the team continues and work is done. And so, regardless of when I woke up and when I sat down to work, I was always 3 hours behind the rest of the team on the East Coast. And it really took me 6 months to transition into that and to get over the feeling like I was constantly playing catch up. I wasn't running, I wasn't sprinting forward with the team. I was just keeping up with the group, it felt like. And I caution a lot of people about that. If you're not at your computer, the team is still going on, work is still being done, and that's okay. The key skill that I look for is the ability to learn quickly. And that comes from previous history doing incident response. I kind of think of three buckets for incident response as well as pen testing, and that is network, host, and malware or reverse engineering. You have network traffic, the host forensics, and then reverse engineering. And I've known maybe two people in my life that are experts in all three. Generally, people are an expert in one or strong in one and proficient in the other two. But when I interview people, I'm not a fan of like what flags would you use in Nmap, or what does netstat-anob get you? In my mind, those are memories. I'm asking you to recall a specific flag rather than base the answer on your true experience. And when I apply that with Dragos interviews, a good example is I'm not going to ask them about a volatility flag or an immunity, quick key. Instead, I'll ask them a scenario on doing host forensics on, say, a turbine controller in a windmill or a roller coaster PLC that they've never seen before. And the specific flags are based on the technology. They're irrelevant. You can Google those. What I'm looking for is a thought process to say, I would get a manual first, so I don't start plugging in RJ45 cables and overriding volatile memory addresses, and really understand the device first. And so in interviewing too often, I see, those calls to specifics. If you get the question, translate it back to experience. Don't make it be a memory exercise. Translate it back to the process and try to talk through it. So, whole bunch of words, very, very quickly. Thanks for sticking with me. Checking the one note in the Track 2 chat, but if there are any other questions, I don't have the YouTube one pulled up. Feel free to shout those out.
I got nothing on YouTube, but you said you saw the question in the Track 2 channel?
Cool. So it looks like the one question, avoid burnout.
Yeah.
It took a while to get to a good operating mode. But to answer the question, how do we avoid burnout with the extensive work from home time? I think it's, in my mind, really coming to an understanding. If the kids have a dentist appointment, I'll take them. Or I ask the wife if she can take them. If the kids have some event, we kind of work together and we don't default on one or the other. It's an understanding that both of us will participate. Now, the hard thing is to not have life and work 24 hours a day, because you're trying to balance everything all the time. And so setting some boundaries, is incredibly important to identify availability and have the mutual respect. But I will say burnout is always a potential. Burnout, I'll end this with a very candid statement. Burnout is always a potential, regardless if you're working in the office or working from home or you have kids or don't have kids. And when I look at employees I work with, and they're always close to burning out, and they're always telling me I need time off, the potential is to be seen as a liability. An employee who works himself into the hospital is not a good employee. An employee who is mature to identify the breaking point and communicate what is practical and set expectations on what they're able to achieve and the resources they've been given, that is good. So I think really there's no avoid burnout. It's, in my view, understanding what your capabilities are within reason and clearly communicating those. That is the best way to avoid burnout. It's not do more with less. It's what is practical and how do I communicate that to level set expectations. So yeah, and great comment in track 2 as well. Set boundaries, communicate those to your manager. So I think we're about on time. Thank you, everybody. A lot of words really quickly. Hit me up on the intertubes or Twitter or whatever if you have questions, and thanks for coming.
Thank you for being here. It is very much appreciated. And yeah, we're getting the cutoff sign. So thank you.